Policy making. Video for PowerPoint, Chapter 1, second section. This section will have a lot of vocabulary that you will find throughout this year that we are using here. The first one is policy. A lot of times this is where people get confused when they see it. It's pretty straightforward. Policy is what the government is doing there. They have it. You can have it for the laws. It can be the enforcement of the laws. You can make a law, but the details of it there and whether and how they are interpreted for it. The policy makers, these are the people that, yes, they make the policy, but there's different ways that they can do it. They do not have to be elected. Usually we think of elected people, but sometimes they are appointed to the jobs. A great example of that will be judges that we have. This term, they are the gatekeepers, because when we the people, we try to get the information to them, and they are supposed to try to then work to what we want. The three policy-making institutions in the United States are pretty straightforward. You think of the three branches. Congress, when they make laws. The executive branch and the way that they enforce those laws. The courts and the way they interpret the laws or they declare something unconstitutional. Today there's a lot of political scientists that will say that we'll separate the president with the bureaucracies and have the bureaucracies as its own institution. I usually include the bureaucracy as part of the executive branch. Policy agenda. What gets the attention of those policy makers there? So how do they get to that? A lot of times it's what the news has in it. Political parties will raise things up with their platform there. Interest groups, when they care about something. Leaders, the president has a bully pulpit. You'll see that term a lot of times here during AP Government, but this is where the president has it, where people will listen to him. President Trump uses Twitter as a bully pulpit in many times, because if he tweets something out, people are going to look at it a lot more than when I tweet something out. Sometimes it takes a crisis. A few years back when we had the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, that people are like, we need to do something. Meanwhile, some scientists and people in the community said, yes, we've been showing this for a while, but sometimes it takes a crisis there, learning from your mistake. And these are connected together. Many times it takes a crisis for it to go into the news there, or to get it on the front page of the news there. Linkage institutions. These are very simple. What gets the people linked to the policy makers. We will have a whole section on this, and this is where our concerns, again, how do you get something that you want, so you really care about saving the manatees, how are you going to get that to become an issue in the state of Florida with the legislative branch. Again, this is where some of those institutions, if you're part of Save the Manatee Club or the Sierra Club, that will go and have lobbyists, and you can write letters, and if you can get in the news about something when a manatee has been hit by a boat or something. Some examples of the linkage institutions, and we will go into this, is actually our second unit after we do the foundations. I jump to the behaviors, the media, the political parties, interest groups, and then in elections and campaigns. You are directly linked. The simplest way is with a vote, but where you can work on campaigns for people that have it on agenda items that you are interested in. So what is your link? What personally do you have there? Whether it be something with the media or an interest group or a political party that you have. Okay, there are three terms that you're going to see throughout. I know our textbook doesn't have this in Chapter 1. I always do it early because you're going to see it in various ways. This is where our political science, where there are theories of government. Our first theory is pluralist theory or pluralism. This is the idea that there are a lot of different groups, and what will end up happening is these groups that have different interests, they will come together, and we will be able to achieve our policy laws by compromise. It is a very positive look at government. Unfortunately, you all have not seen that much during your lifetime there, but it's the idea that you have two groups, whether it be two different parties, but they're going to find some common ground and pass it. Whenever you hear about crossing the aisle together. Historically, you look at Federalist Paper 10, and this is where James Madison is writing about this ideas that we will have when he's talking about different factions or groups, and we'll be able to work through compromise in here. We actually today, it is even easier because groups can come together through the internet. I mean, compared to 25 years ago, there is a lot easier. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. We end up a lot of times with more separation as people are only basically reading what they want to read. The second theory, again, this is the positive viewpoint of it. Second theory of government is the elite, or sometimes it's called the class theory, or elite class theory. That one's pretty straightforward. The idea that whoever's rich or whoever's elite and whoever's in the upper class, they make the rules. Whoever has the money makes the rules. Historically, we look even in the beginning of our Constitution that the only elected people were the representatives, so senators, presidents through the Electoral College, Supreme Court judges. None of them were directly elected that we have. Today, a lot of times we will look at the rich or the corporate world, Wall Street, that the banks, these big businesses, they are able to do that. They're above the law. They're too big to fail idea. The third theory is hyperpluralism. Notice that where we had pluralism before, now hyper, we have many groups. Now this is a negative viewpoint where pluralism is positive. This is more negative. We have too many groups. Nothing gets done with this. That term gridlock comes in. Nothing gets done. Congress, they're basically everybody wants their own thing. They're not going to give any. Where pluralism says we'll compromise, hyperpluralism is no, we're not going to, and thus nothing ever gets done. You have seen a bit of that through the last 3 years with our different political parties. Some other modern examples will be like if you have an environmental group or energy group that they don't want to give any compromise for that. That term gridlock, here's where policy gridlock, so policy are the laws of things that are made, is a condition though when the interest there is nothing that gets done. Again, hyperpluralism is connected with that. This term divided government that you will see, we currently have that. There's elections coming up, but we currently have a House that is dominated by Democrats, a Senate that is Republicans. They do not get along very often unless sometimes something makes them come together there. So if three parts, the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, are not of all the same party, that is divided government. Somewhere along the line, you can have things stopped. There have been times that it can actually be positive. There was in the 1980s where the Democratic Congress worked together with President Reagan, who was a Republican. There were times in the 1990s that the Democratic President Bill Clinton worked together with the Republican Congress in the 90s. And we had a lot of things that were done. So there are positive aspects. The last several years of what you have seen under President Obama and President Trump maybe haven't been very positive, and we have had a lot of policy gridlock. But there are times in history that we can look and say that it makes sure that we don't have extremists one way or another. Here's where you can look and see. What do you think that you are here? Most of you are probably some sort of combination. You might even have a little bit of all three of them. Unfortunately, one thing that I have noticed in the last several years is most of the students are usually more the negative side of the elite and hyperpluralism, not too much pluralism, because it is what you have seen with the gridlock that we have had, the animosity that we have between the two different parties in recent years.